Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere delightfully uneventful, the corridors of Byzantine bureaucracy. Imagine dim marble hallways echoing with sandals, the scent of melting wax, and dusty parchment filling the air, and the low murmuring of clerks complaining about ink stains. It's the 6th century, you're wearing an aggressively itchy wool tunic, and your job is to copy official edicts. Again, for the 4th time today, because your supervisor thinks your Greek loops look too confident. You're not a soldier, you're not a noble, you're not even a priest. You're something far more dangerous, a paper pusher with a grudge and access to the empire's incoming mail. Congratulations. You work in the Byzantine civil service, possibly the most sophisticated, slow-moving, and drama-filled office system the ancient world ever produced. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city and local time in the comments. I love knowing where this sleepy little history club is tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the administration building, which smells faintly of goat fat candles and damp parchment. You pass a scribe yelling at a junior clerk for using the wrong kind of reed pen. This one makes a loopier epsilon, he hisses, brandishing the offending tool like it's a dagger. You keep your eyes down. Office politics here are serious and not the fun kind. Not the Janet from HR keeps stealing staplers kind, no. More the if you sign the wrong scroll, your family might be exiled kind. The Byzantine bureaucracy was enormous. Think Roman efficiency with twice the paperwork and 3 times the passive-aggressive memos. Historians still argue whether the system helped preserve the empire or slowly strangled it with ribbon-bound procedures. But one thing is certain: Byzantine scribes were serious about their roles and even more serious about each other's mistakes. You settle into your hard-backed wooden stool. Today's task, copying 37 imperial tax orders onto scrolls made from papyrus that's been reused more times than your uncle's fishing jokes. The ink is clumpy. The desk wobbles. Your colleague on the left breathes loudly through his nose. Welcome to your day. Occasionally there's excitement. A new dye shipment arrives and everyone rushes to see if it's purple enough to be imperial. If it is only certain senior officials can touch it or wear anything that color ever. Bureaucracy here doesn't just manage people. It also assigns them colors, cloak lengths, and how many silk tassels they're allowed per rank. But you're focused on your own tiny rebellion. You write a little flourish under your name, just a twist of ink, a personal sign. Your supervisor spots it. He clears his throat so loudly it echoes down 3 corridors. You hastily pretend to scratch it out. There are rules for this. There are always rules. Still, life in the bureaucracy isn't entirely grim. There's a sort of comfort in the rhythm. Wake, robe, write, eat, write again. Gossip report to the supervisor. Write more. Go home. There's a little joy when your pen flows smoothly. A small thrill when someone gets demoted for insubordination via footnote. You learn to read the silence between the scratching of pens and measure people's moods by the number of ink blots on their scrolls. One of the fringe perks scribes often included jokes in the margins, tiny, sleepy, handwritten memes that future scholars would puzzle over. Like the one found on a tax scroll from 872 that reads, "This is the 4th time I've copied this, and still no one reads it. Glory to the Emperor." That's basically the ancient version of sent from my iPhone. One day, a courier bursts in with an urgent scroll. The room goes quiet. Urgent scrolls are rarely good. You glance up, heart thudding. Your supervisor opens it, frowns, clears his throat. His Majesty requires a full index of provincial vineyard taxes from the last 20 years, he intones. Groans ripple through the room like waves. Someone drops their pen in despair. Someone else mutters, "That's going to take a new scroll cabinet." This is the Byzantine civil service, a beautiful, chaotic machine oiled by coffee substitutes and quiet contempt. You survive by doing your job just well enough not to get noticed, but not so well that you're promoted to a department that reports directly to the emperor, because those guys never sleep and always look worried. Occasionally, tempers flare. The inkwells mysteriously go missing. The next day they return, but one has been replaced with vinegar. A prank. A warning. No one knows, but everyone suddenly writes very carefully. Petty squabbles dominate the lunch hour. Someone accuses someone else of hoarding fresh papyrus. There's a debate over whether a tax form should have been filed in triplicate or quadruplicate. You nod along and pretend to care. You mostly just want to get back to your seat before the good lamp oil runs out and the room smells like damp onions again. It's a life of small comforts, like a warm inkstone, or being assigned to the quiet supervisor instead of the one who uses too much cologne. But also a life of constant tension. You must always be correct, yet invisible. Diligent, but not ambitious. Knowledgeable, but not arrogant. Basically everything that modern office workers also pretend to be during quarterly evaluations. The Byzantines had the kind of bureaucracy that could outlive wars. When cities fell and generals vanished, the scribes remained still updating land records and scheduling inspections of aqueducts no one had seen in a decade. Some historians say the empire didn't fall until the clerks stopped showing up. Others argue they never stopped. They just moved to quieter places with better snacks. And so your first day ends. You stretch, crack your back, and trudge home through the flickering lamplight. Your fingers are stained with ink. You smell like beeswax and mild despair. But you copied 37 edicts, corrected a colleague's grammar, and made it through without being reassigned to provincial goat census duty. That's a win in your books. You wake up groggily, still half dreaming about scrolls that write themselves and inkwells that never run dry. But alas, reality smells like stale wool and reheated lentil mash. You tug on your tunic and secure your belt, the very belt that identifies your office rank. It's not decorative. It's a walking resume. One misplaced knot, and suddenly you're mistaken for a junior assistant instead of a third-tier assessor of imperial grain logs. Career suicide. You arrive at the chancery just as the first rays of pale sunlight hit the gilded eagle above the door. You're early, which means you get first pick of the lamps. You aim for one that doesn't flicker and doesn't smell like old goat. Victory. Today your supervisor seems distracted fussing with his sleeves. His sleeves are everything. In the Byzantine civil service, clothing is not just fashion, it's hierarchy in fabric form. Everyone knows that your rank dictates not just what you can wear, but what you must wear. And if you wear something you're not entitled to, oh boy, expect anonymous complaints scribbled on tiny parchment scraps and left in the suggestion coffer, which is neither locked nor private. Let's talk hats. Specifically, the kamalaukion. It's a stiff, domed cap that looks like someone tried to turn a bread roll into headwear. The higher your status, the more outrageous your hat. Some are trimmed with pearls, some are dipped in gold leaf. And one poor fool in records wore his upside down for a week and was never promoted again. But it's not just hats. Robes have their own language: gold-threaded hems, high rank, velvet lining, clerical privilege. 6 buttons down the side. You're in logistics. 7 buttons. Congratulations. You're in senior logistics. 8. You've made a powerful enemy in the Button Guild and should consider going barefoot for a while. Historians still argue whether this obsessive attention to attire was a way to enforce order or just a bureaucratic game of dress-up that got wildly out of hand. One theory posits that the clothing codes were so detailed, entire offices existed just to monitor sleeve length and embroidery content. If you showed up in last season's dye palette, good luck getting your reports signed. You glance around the office. It's a sea of muted reds, careful golds, and aggressively starched collars. Everyone looks slightly uncomfortable, which is how you know the system is working. The clerk next to you is muttering about a colleague who wore blue silk yesterday. Blue silk reserved for those in proximity to the imperial secretariat. Scandalous. But the most sought-after item of all, the ceremonial belt with tassels that indicate your exact bureaucratic tier. You once heard a story, probably exaggerated, about a man who sewed extra tassels on his belt and managed to bluff his way into a meeting with the emperor's brother. He was found out, of course. But the fact that it worked for 3 whole days legendary. Office drama in Byzantium wasn't just about who misfiled what. It was about fashion warfare, a passive-aggressive tug of sleeve, a pointed glance at a frayed hem, a suspicious cough when someone wore crimson on a Thursday. You once watched 2 senior scribes walk into a room, realize they were wearing robes with identical embroidery, and refused to speak to each other for a week. The emperor himself set the tone. If he wore a new brooch, expect imitators. If he was seen in an off-shoulder cloak, rare, but it happened, tailors across Constantinople stayed up all night redesigning the uniform regulations. You don't follow trends, you survive them. It's not all ridiculous, though. Your garments are also your armor. In a world where paper means power, where one phrase can exile a city council or pardon a war criminal, appearances matter. Looking correct is half your job. The other half is making sure no one catches you dozing off during scroll dictation. Mid-morning arrives with a clatter. Someone knocks over a robe stand. Yes, there are robe stands, each with tiny bronze plaques labeling whose garment belongs where. It's chaos. Robes everywhere, a fringe in someone's ink pot, feathers in someone's soup. Wait, feathers? You sigh. Some low-ranking official has decided to decorate their robe. That's not regulation. That's a scandal in the making. In the lunchroom, if you can call it that. The topic of the day is robe laundering. The wax seals used on scrolls tend to melt, you see, and if you're not careful, they drip on your sleeves. Last week, one unfortunate scribe had to soak his entire tunic in vinegar to get rid of the waxy stain, and now he permanently smells like regret and salad dressing. You sit beside a junior clerk whose tunic looks suspiciously dyed, the wrong shade of green. You raise an eyebrow. He notices. "Olive mishap," he whispers. Likely story. In the background, an older supervisor is retelling the tale of the Great Robe Confusion of 877. 2 identical robes. 2 identical-looking scribes. 1 crucial scroll that went to the wrong governor. A minor military clash that could have been avoided with better laundry labeling. The lesson: never borrow a colleague's robe. Ever. The afternoon drags on. Scrolls pile up. A rumor spreads that the robe inspector is making surprise visits. Panic ensues. People straighten their hems, adjust their collars, and in one extreme case, discreetly swap belts with someone half asleep. You just keep writing. Carefully, quietly, your belt is secure. Your robe is correctly pleated. Your hat, while slightly crooked, is regulation issue. You survive another day in the most fashion-obsessed office of the ancient world. Barely. The morning begins, as it always does, with a hunt for supplies. You arrive at your desk and find your ink missing. Again. Your reed pen is dry, your blotting cloth has been used to polish someone else's brass brooch, and the scroll you were working on yesterday has been mysteriously relocated to the corrections pile. Someone is playing games, someone petty. And you, dear bureaucrat, are caught in the crossfire. Welcome to the great stapler shortage. No, they didn't have actual staplers, but the concept is just as vital. When every document is a long, fluttery scroll, and everything must be signed, sealed, and stored in triplicate organizing becomes an art form. An exhausting, soul-melting, papyrus-hoarding art form. And when even one inkpot or scroll ribbon goes missing, tempers flare. You navigate the supply chamber, a dusty alcove that smells like boiled linen and old glue. The supply clerk is in no mood for small talk. He eyes your request with suspicion. Red ink, he says. For what purpose? You try to explain that it's for headings. Emphasis. Urgency. He snorts. Everyone wants red ink, even the monks. You're handed a tiny vial, barely enough for a signature flourish. Red is power. Red is scarcity. Red is drama. As you leave, you overhear two junior officials whispering about someone who hoarded parchment last winter. Hoarded. In a time of low imports, that's borderline treason. They say his chamber was found packed with scrolls hidden inside hollowed-out lecterns. Historians still argue whether this was political sabotage or just extreme forgetfulness. Back at your desk, you survey the damage. Your neighbor's scrolls have bled ink onto your own. One of the wax seals has smeared into the margin. You'll need to redo the entire thing. Again. You mutter something unkind under your breath, but not loud enough to earn a demerit. Oh yes. Demerits. Byzantium didn't believe in casual feedback. If you made too many mistakes, you received a small slip of parchment with a mark. No explanation, no discussion, just the mark. Some officials collected them like a badge of honor. Others wept in the lavatorium. The problem with this whole system, aside from the ink that smells like old figs, is the sheer volume of scrolls. There's a scroll for everything. Livestock counts, imported rugs, permits for dance performances, and even permission slips for bridge repairs. These scrolls must be labeled, categorized, and bound with colored ribbons. Each hue corresponding to a department, a province, or the degree of urgency. Heaven forbid you mix up lavender with lilac. You once saw a new scribe mistakenly file a water tax dispute under military provisions. The resulting confusion rerouted a shipment of camels to a fishing village. No one has seen that scribe since. And then there's the scroll tube debacle. Picture it: hundreds of identical-looking wooden tubes, each labeled in an ancient shorthand that varies depending on the region, the year, and occasionally the scribe's mood. Finding the right one is like searching for a specific noodle in a pot of soup. You remember a clerk, Litos, or maybe Petros, who tried to implement a color-coded filing rack. It lasted 3 days before someone accidentally reversed the order. Office Sabotage Medieval Edition. But the most absurd challenge of all document length. There are no pages, just one long piece of papyrus or parchment. Too long and it tears. Too short and you run out of space mid-sentence. Some enterprising officials tried splicing extra sections in, but this made the scrolls comically bulky. One official tripped over his own scroll in court. The emperor laughed. The scroll was burned. You try not to think about that as you carefully measure your current scroll. You'll need to summarize a 3-paragraph imperial decree into 2.5. You could ask for a longer scroll, but you'd have to fill out a requisition form, wait for approval, and risk being mocked for inefficient summarization. So you tighten your script, you shrink your lettering, and you pray the ink doesn't smudge. Nearby, a fellow scribe sighs loudly and begins chanting under his breath, some sort of calming poem involving olives and revenge. No one bats an eye. This is normal. Someone across the room suddenly yells, "Where is my blue thread?" All heads turn. Scroll ribbons, like ink, are jealously guarded. The blue thread denotes matters of state security. Using it without cause can get you a written warning or worse, reassignment to the grain counting department. You avoid the drama by slipping back into your task. The rustle of parchment, the scratch of reed pens, and the occasional clatter of a wax seal stamper fills the air like a soft, chaotic lullaby. It's all strangely soothing in the way that only structured inefficiency can be. The pace is glacial. The stakes are somehow both low and life-altering. You misspell a word, no one notices. You misfile a grain report. A village starves. Sleep tight. In one of the more obscure corners of the office, just past the forgotten tax codes shelf, you once found an ancient scroll labeled Reasons for Document Delays. It was a list, handwritten and deeply sarcastic. Item 1. The geese ate it. Item 7. Ink became self-aware. Item 15. The emperor sneezed and we had to start over. You've never dared show it to anyone, but you keep a copy hidden in your satchel for days like this, because despite all the chaos, you care about your work. You know your penmanship matters, that the work you do slow and tedious, though it maybe actually runs the empire. At least that's what you tell yourself when your scrolls get trampled by someone trying to rescue a cat from the ledgers. At the end of the day, you check your ribbon drawer. 1 red, 2 green, no blue, still no stapler. And yet somehow you're proud. You survived another scroll-heavy day in the most passive-aggressively ambitious office ever built. Midweek arrives with the steady drip of rain tapping the chancery's clay roof tiles. It's the kind of damp, overcast morning that makes everyone just a little more irritable than usual, like the scrolls are slightly soggier, the ink more rebellious, and your patience already on its last thread by the time you sit down. Today you're stationed beside the most enthusiastic gossip in the building, Spiridon. He doesn't write. He whispers. He hunches close to your ear and begins immediately, even before your ink is stirred. Did you hear about what happened in Treasury? No. Of course not. They don't want you to know. His eyes dart left and right as if spies might leap from the file drawers. The new tax overseer was caught drinking coffee. He says it like he's announcing treason. Now to be clear, it's not actual coffee. The Byzantines hadn't quite gotten the real stuff yet. What Spiridon means is the thick, bitter, boiled barley water brew that office staff claim helps focus the mind, but mostly just leads to long bathroom breaks and anxious foot tapping. Still caffeinated or not, the act of sipping anything luxurious during office hours is frowned upon. Unless you're at least 6th-tier nobility or a monk with papal clearance, which this tax overseer was not. But gossip isn't limited to unauthorized beverages. Today's menu includes who wore sandals without buckles, who's supposedly smuggling extra olive oil rations in scroll tubes, and which eunuch has been caught exchanging love poems with a palace seamstress through coded stitching on robe hems, no less. You smile politely, nod at the right moments, and write as fast as you can, because you know what happens when you miss even a single scroll update. Someone like Spiridon might accidentally file a complaint with your supervisor that you've been slacking. And in this place, a whisper can carry farther than a horse-drawn dispatch. Gossip is ironically a part of the job. You're expected to know who's feuding with whom, who skipped yesterday's midday prayer, and which assistant forgot to bow in the direction of the emperor's residence during scroll delivery. It's not paranoia if it's protocol. Historians still argue whether this constant undercurrent of tattletales and whispered alliances served as a primitive HR system, or just a culturally sanctioned version of office sabotage. One 10th century chronicler described the court as a garden of olives and whispers, some sweet, most sour. There's even a term in the administrative records, the katalalos, an unofficial role for someone who discreetly reported inappropriate behavior to higher-ups. The katalalos was not a formal job title, but everyone knew who filled the role in each office. In your department, that would be Eugenia, the elderly clerk who pretends to sleep during meetings, but somehow knows everything. You once saw her correct a document you hadn't even written yet. Office dynamics shift around her. People sit straighter when she's near. They speak in more formal tones. Even Spiridon lowers his voice when she shuffles past. But let's not forget the food. The Byzantine version of a tea break was something between a light snack and a diplomatic crisis. The staff kitchen, if you can call it that, offers lukewarm lentil stew, wilted herbs, and hard bread rolls that could be used as blunt force weapons. If someone brought in real honey or cheese, they either came from money or are bribing someone. Today you managed to sneak a slice of pickled turnip from the archivist's secret stash. It's crunchy, sharp, not exactly refreshing, but enough to keep your brain from melting into your scrolls. Meanwhile, across the table, someone is loudly chewing what looks like stale barley paste and trying to start a rumor about a cleric's pet goose. Lunch breaks are short and suspiciously silent. Everyone watches everyone. The one time someone laughed too hard, 3 people were reassigned by sunset. Still, gossip serves a purpose. It binds you to this place. It gives your day rhythm. Without it, the work would be just ink and repetition. With it, it becomes theatrical, petty, yes, but entertaining in a slow-burn, whispered threats kind of way. Back at your desk, a folded scrap of parchment appears in your cubby. No signature, just a hastily written line. The tax scrolls were never sealed. Tell no one. You blink. Look around. No one meets your eye. You carefully fold it back and tuck it beneath your scroll weights. This is your life now. A workplace where notes like this arrive as often as ink refills, where coffee-like brews are both sacred and scandalous, where eunuchs fall in love and robe hems speak louder than words. A sudden commotion down the hall, 2 junior assistants are arguing about scroll placement. One insists that royal decrees go above tax reports. The other, a hardline traditionalist, insists that nothing should go above tax reports. A supervisor intervenes. Voices rise, and then calm. Silence. A thin, papery peace. You breathe out, dip your pen again, and keep writing, because in the Byzantine bureaucracy there's always another whisper waiting. And sometimes, if you listen closely enough, it's not just gossip, it's strategy. By mid-morning, your inkwell is half empty, your neck is half sore, and the man 2 desks down is humming the same 3-note tune he hums every Thursday. You suspect he doesn't even know he's doing it, but you do. You always do. It's the little things that slowly unravel you in this place. Not wars, not rebellions, but tuneless humming, and the rustle of scrolls gone askew. Today's task: reviewing the registry of imperial job titles for the new regional appointees. Seems straightforward enough. You pull out the first scroll, unwrap it, and immediately regret everything. The job title at the top: Logothetes of the Imperial Herds and Auxiliary Fodder Distribution Compliance. You pause. You read it again. Is that a real job? Yes, it is. In Byzantium, titles weren't just labels, they were theatrical performances in Greek. The longer and more convoluted, the better. A good title could wrap around a scroll twice. A great title had commas, honorifics, and at least one obscure reference to a minor saint or celestial body. Some officials added extra words just to sound busier. You once met a man whose title was so long it had to be split into 2 lines on his appointment letter, and even then they had to shrink the margins. He spent his entire first week explaining it to people. Most stopped listening halfway through. Some titles describe real responsibilities: Praetorian Prefect of Illyricum, or Magister of the Imperial Wardrobe. Others, a little fuzzier. What exactly does the Secretary of the Fourth Watchful Eye do? No one knows. But he gets better seating in the staff chapel and a daily pastry allowance, so clearly someone thinks it matters. You suspect that half the empire's power dynamics are encoded in these absurd little phrases. Historians still argue whether this title inflation was bureaucratic bloat or a deliberate social glue keeping egos soothed and lines of authority ever so slightly blurred. The title inflation has side effects, of course. For instance, misunderstandings. You recall the scandal of 912 when 2 clerks with nearly identical titles both attempted to represent the empire at a marriage negotiation. One was supposed to handle dowry details. The other was just there to transport gifts. The groom's side left deeply confused, and someone almost married the wrong cousin. Then there was the case of the title that backfired. A young assistant hoping to impress referred to himself as the under-logothete of Maritime Efficiency Liaison Reports Provisional. The provisional part gave him just enough leeway to avoid actual work. But it didn't stop the real maritime department from filing an official protest, and for a brief, shining week, he was technically declared a threat to naval morale. Glorious. And yes, there are people who forge titles, mostly low-ranking scribes hoping for better lunch seating or access to the hallway with the good oil lamps. One clever clerk tried to smudge the ink on his original title so that Junior looked like Senior. It worked until someone noticed he had the wrong wax seal color. He now oversees the record shelf in the draftiest corner of the chancery. A cautionary tale whispered often, but sometimes the titles do shift by accident. Like the time a typo turned Master of Receipts into Master of Regrets. The document circulated for weeks before anyone corrected it. By then, the name stuck. People still call that post the Regret Master behind closed doors. And then there's the curious story of Methodius, a scribe who once managed purely by bureaucratic accident to hold 2 job titles simultaneously, one ranking him above his supervisor, the other beneath the assistant to his assistant. For 4 glorious days, Methodius used this confusion to claim both imperial privileges and plausible deniability. I would act. But sadly, the other Methodios must approve this. He dined on stuffed dates every afternoon and was briefly assigned a personal bell ringer. Eventually, someone noticed. He was reassigned to goat census reconciliation. Even legends fall. These things matter. In a system where you can't always speak plainly, especially in a room full of spies and scribes, your title is your loudest voice. You wield it like a weapon or a shield. You drop it into conversation like a dagger on a silk pillow. As assistant reviewer to the deputy keeper of Eastern Archives, you begin and watch people squirm, wondering whether that gives you more or less authority than they assumed. This is office drama in its purest form. No shouting, no direct insults, just endless, careful, ceremonial one-upmanship written in Gothic calligraphy. You spend the next hour updating the appointment scrolls. You scratch out an outdated title. Here, add a newly minted one there. Notary of Freshwater Dispute Logistics is a new one. Someone's clearly been lobbying for that for a while. Then comes a pause. A scroll with a blank space for a new position. You dip your pen, hesitate, and then cheekily write, Custodian of Imperial Paperclips. You smirk. A harmless joke, surely. But later you find that very scroll being passed along to the appointment committee. You don't say a word. Somewhere out there, a paperclip custodian may now exist because of you. At the end of the day, you roll up the appointment scrolls and send them off for sealing. Another day, another 100 names, another 100 tiny plays in this slow-moving theater of Byzantine ambition. You walk home tired but amused, wondering whether your own title still fits on one line. Probably not. But at least you haven't been promoted to inspector of wet ink drying schedules. Yet. You arrive to work a little later than usual, and already there's a line outside the central office vestibule. A queue of scowling officials, cradling wax-stamped scrolls like they're holding delicate children. The air smells of damp parchment and faint lavender oil, and the whispering is louder than usual. That only means one thing. Someone opened the Emperor's inbox. Technically, it's not a box. It's a heavily guarded alcove in the Office of Imperial Correspondence, with a curtain embroidered in gold thread and 2 ceremonial guards who look like they haven't blinked since breakfast. But everyone calls it the inbox, because that's what it is, the place where all complaints, petitions, reports, and urgent observations are deposited to await imperial attention, which may or may not happen this year. The inbox is sacred, dangerous, mysterious, and often tragically ignored. Today, however, rumor has it that the inbox has been reviewed. Not just glanced at, opened, looked at by someone in the purple. The whisper trail says it was the Emperor himself. Or maybe his brother. Or possibly just the imperial cat, who once famously urinated on a land dispute letter and resolved it more effectively than 5 committees combined. Still, you straighten your shoulders. Today might be important. Your job today is simple record which letters go unanswered. Yes, Byzantium had entire clerks dedicated to tracking the things the Emperor chose to ignore. This isn't as absurd as it sounds. In a world of relentless messages, ignoring someone with formality was an art. There were protocols. If a scroll was unopened after a week, it was labeled deferendum. After a month, ignotum. After 6 months, it was ceremonially filed in the shelf of patience and forgotten forever. One of your tasks is to place the red wax markers, tiny blobs that go on the scroll ends, to indicate this dignified oblivion. You do it slowly, reverently, with the care of someone filing silent rejections. The people who wrote these petitions will never know their pleas were carefully categorized before being dismissed. Historians still argue whether this strategy of deliberate ritualistic inaction was clever politics or slow institutional collapse. Some say the empire survived so long because it refused to rush. Others claim it died from never calling anyone back. Today, one letter in particular catches your eye. It's from the governor of Dyrrachium, written in a flowery, exasperated tone. My region is overrun with geese. The villagers request imperial instruction on whether they may be classified as a public nuisance or divine omen. You stare at it. It's beautifully written. It's stamped. It's sealed. It's completely doomed. You mark it with red wax and sigh. Goodbye, goose drama. Another scroll bears the mark of a high-ranking bishop requesting clarification on whether two competing hymn versions should be merged. The emperor is not a choir master. This too receives the seal of silence. But not all letters are dismissed. Some are answered just not by the emperor. That's where delegation comes in. Enter the hypatos ton secreton, the high secretary. A man who lives somewhere in the vaulted shadow of the palace, only appearing when a scroll needs an answer that sounds imperial but doesn't require imperial input. He writes in purple ink, well, purple-ish signs, with a vague flourish, and answers with sentences that say absolutely nothing while sounding important. You once received a training scroll that included sample phrases. His radiance acknowledges your concern and urges you to proceed with discretion. The matter has been weighed and the balance remains as it was. In the spirit of concord, continue as if no contradiction exists. You've used all of them at least twice. Sometimes delegation gets out of hand. One famous example is the Chain of 12, where a simple letter about bread taxes passed through 12 different departments before returning unread to the original sender, who then submitted it again, thinking it had been misplaced. That letter still exists now, framed as a warning in the Chancery's West Wing. Of course, there's a darker side to the inbox. Some letters contain dangerous requests, accusations, hints of rebellion. Those get whisked away to the special files where no one sees them again. You once caught a glimpse of one burnt edges ink, scrawled in furious haste. It mentioned a governor stockpiling weapons. The next week, that governor resigned for reasons of spiritual exhaustion. But the strangest part of the inbox is what's not in it. No one ever submits letters requesting less bureaucracy. That would be treason. No one ever admits confusion about job titles. That would be weakness. Instead, the inbox is a theater of pretend clarity. Every scroll a confident plea. Every message pretending not to whisper, "Please, just read me." And the emperor, he reads. Sometimes. Maybe. No one knows. Once during a festival, he allegedly opened the inbox and selected a scroll at random to resolve. The story goes, he picked one about overgrown hedges in a noble's courtyard and personally ordered the bushes trimmed into the shape of Saint Basil. Whether or not this actually happened is irrelevant. Everyone believes it did. That's what matters. After lunch, you help carry the unopened letters back to their shelves. The stack is heavy. Dozens of voices asking for help, judgment, mercy, clarification, all gently ignored with due process. As you place the scrolls on their respective labeled cubbies, trade disputes, inheritance quarrels, hymnal, conflicts, and unclassified geese. You feel oddly serene. There's something comforting in the permanence of it all. The system never changes. The inbox fills. The inbox waits. The inbox answers when it feels like it. And so you ink your brush one final time and mark another request as deferendum, a polite way of saying, maybe next year, probably never, but thank you for writing. The rain is gone today, replaced by a brisk wind that rattles the high shutters of the chancery and makes your scrolls flutter like anxious birds. You weigh them down with an inkwell and a decorative pebble from your cousin's garden gifts that somehow mean more than your entire weekly salary. The room is unusually tense. Even the humming clerk is silent. You know what this means. The imperial court is in session, and the drama is spilling downhill. Byzantine court life is famous for its opulence and ceremony. Gold-threaded cloaks, throne room rituals, and imperial processions. But what they don't show in the mosaics is the administrative tailspin it creates. When a new favorite is appointed or a general falls from grace, you feel it not just in headlines, edicts, but in how your office rearranges its seating chart, sometimes literally. You arrive at your desk to find that your seat has been reassigned, not by notice, but because someone else is already sitting there humming smugly. You relocate grumbling to a spot near the windows where the wind steals your notes and the wax seals melt faster in the sun. The cause of the shakeup: a new appointee to the logothete of the General Treasury, an important office that controls not only the empire's coins but also its gossip budget, if you're honest. Rumor has it he's already demanded gold accents on his penholder and removed all colleagues who chew too loudly during midday meal. It's not the first time you've seen court drama collide with daily bureaucracy. Once a minor prince was accused of stealing a bejeweled ink jar. This resulted in a 3-month audit of everyone's desk supplies. You had to explain twice that your paperweight was not in fact a stolen ruby, just a very shiny beetle shell. Today the changes are more subtle. A new list of authorized phrases to be used when addressing imperial envoys has arrived. Previously your grace, now your radiant intermediary of divine will. You scribble the update in the office manual with the resigned hands of a man who's added 15 new salutations this quarter alone. And then there's the matter of the seating protocol. A new hierarchy chart is posted showing who may sit beside whom at official meetings, copying tables, and even communal soup gatherings. You're now technically below your own assistant because her aunt married a bishop's cousin. You suspect a mistake. You also suspect you won't win if you complain. Historians still argue whether the constant reshuffling of bureaucratic rank was part of a clever system to prevent consolidation of power or simply the result of very bored clerks with too much colored ink. The truth is probably both. You remember the infamous Council of Chersonese, where a dispute about seating arrangements escalated into a full administrative shutdown. For 3 days, no one copied anything. One poor clerk cried after being told his stool was too familiar for his title. The emperor himself had to intervene, allegedly muttering, "Just sit down, all of you," before retreating to his garden for wine. This is how things work here. Office politics are politics. An offhand remark in a corridor can translate into policy. A frown during a staff meeting might determine the next 5-year trade plan. Even the way you unroll a scroll can indicate support or opposition to someone's promotion. You once rolled a scroll too quickly and accidentally smacked a high-ranking official's cup of lentil broth onto his robe. It was yellow. He was wearing ivory. You've never apologized so fast in your life. At lunch, the air is thick with speculation. The new Treasury appointee is apparently partial to goose liver and dislikes the sound of scraping quills. Everyone is terrified. You start practicing writing with less noise, curling your hand in awkward shapes to minimize friction. It feels ridiculous. But this is survival now. Back at your desk, you receive a memo. New language is to be used when recording imperial income. Taxes are now voluntary remittances of gratitude. This is somehow both hilarious and deeply terrifying. You laugh quietly, of course. Loud laughter is currently out of favor with the imperial chamberlain who believes mirth undermines reverence. The only permitted expression of joy is now a subtle eyebrow lift. You practice it. You fail. And let's not forget the all-staff meeting scheduled for tomorrow. It's been moved to the East Hall, which has fewer windows and more statues of intimidating saints. The agenda. Clarifications regarding clerical behavior and enthusiasm thresholds. You already know what this means. Someone was too excited about finishing their scroll. Probably clapped again. Foolish. You retreat into your work hoping to stay invisible. You've mastered this art. Just enough productivity to remain useful, just enough silence to avoid notice. A slow-moving, ink-stained shadow in the great Byzantine machine. Occasionally, you glance at the court reports. Today, a general has been demoted, a chamberlain promoted, and a princess's engagement annulled because her fiancé claimed purple socks were too extravagant. That last part may not be official, but it's what Spiridon insists he heard from a cook's cousin. And yet, in this maddening swirl of status and scrolls, you find strange comfort. You understand the rules. You know when to speak, when to bow, when to deliberately misfile a scroll just to buy time. You are a creature of paper and protocol. And so you roll your next scroll, slowly, respectfully pausing for emphasis at the title. You use the correct phrase. You adjust your tunic. You raise one eyebrow in appreciation of your own success. Because in Byzantium, surviving the bureaucracy is the victory. You begin the day as you always do, with a sigh, a cracked knuckle, and the distant, hopeful aroma of someone else's bread. But today, there's something different in the air. A certain buzz, the kind of murmur that only means one thing in the chancery: someone's reputation is about to collapse in spectacular fashion. You try not to be too interested, but who are we kidding? You're already leaning slightly toward Spiridon's desk before you even open your inkpot. It's Theodotos Spiridon hisses before you can ask. Got caught slipping a ribbon of verse into one of the Empress's laundry memos. You blink. Poetry. Romantic. Poetry. Oh yes. Office romance in the Byzantine bureaucracy was rare, forbidden, and extremely inefficient, but that never stopped anyone. Theodotos, a middle-ranking eunuch with a flair for handwriting, had apparently developed a subtle admiration for one of the Empress's ladies-in-waiting. Rather than risk open contact, he began composing lines of courtly affection hidden inside the flourishes of his calligraphy. Tiny, careful phrases tucked into the margins of linen inventories and soap requisitions. It was all going swimmingly until someone, a jealous rival or just a bored junior clerk, noticed that the words, "your eyes like polished olives," didn't quite belong in the Empress's monthly fabric audit. Now everything's unraveling. Romance is dangerous enough in this office, but in writing, with physical evidence, that's career sabotage wrapped in scented parchment. You watch as Theodotos is summoned to the upper archives. No one says anything. That's how it works here. The scandal is never named. It's just absorbed, folded into the structure. His desk is cleared by mid-afternoon. His inkwell quietly reassigned, his goose quill box now mysteriously missing. Still, office romance doesn't die just because it's dangerous. It just goes underground. You've heard stories. Foolish, beautiful stories of clerks composing love letters disguised as supply lists or scheduling ink-sharing appointments with people who just happened to sit near the window. One legend involves two scribes who allegedly carried on an entire flirtation through the positioning of punctuation marks. A well-placed semicolon was basically a kiss. Of course, not all of it is sweet. Rumors fly faster than scrolls. A misplaced glance, an extended conversation about robe starching, or even walking someone home in a rainstorm, these can all spark talk. And in this place, talk is more permanent than wax seals. The worst-case scenario: getting caught up in a fictional scandal. Once, a completely fabricated affair between a tax officer and a copyist spiraled so far out of control that both were reassigned despite never actually speaking. Their careers ruined by sheer imagination. Historians still debate whether this level of workplace melodrama reflects the anxiety of a heavily stratified system, or just the unquenchable human desire for romantic distraction, even when buried under 15 layers of papyrus. In the break chamber, more of a windowless nook, with tepid barley water and hard rolls, two junior assistants are whispering about another scandal. This one involves an archivist, a nobleman's daughter, and a misplaced copy of an estate map that now implies someone owns a vineyard they absolutely shouldn't. Is it true? No one knows. But by this afternoon, everyone will. You nod politely, sip the barley water, which tastes like a damp sock, and wonder what your own name sounds like when whispered scandalously. Probably not very impressive. Too many consonants, not enough mystique. But then again, maybe that's for the best. You've seen what gossip can do. You've watched reputations rise and fall on little more than a smirk. You remember the clerk who once smiled too broadly at a high-ranking nun and was reassigned to the olive weighing records an entire year of nothing but fluctuating oil quantities. And yet even you once received a mysterious note. Folded parchment. No name. Just a line. You write like someone who knows how to read between lines. You never found out who sent it. You never replied. But you kept the note tucked behind your scroll weights for months. Maybe it was sincere. Maybe it was a joke. But in this place, even the idea of connection can make the ink feel warmer. By late afternoon, another rumor is spreading that a married clerk was caught writing verses to a monk. Monks are off limits, obviously. Celibacy and all that. But some monks, you've noticed, write suspiciously elegant responses to otherwise boring letters. One clerk, clearly swept up in the spirit of things, tries to recite a love poem aloud during scroll filing. It's about eyelids and the color of candlelight. He's immediately given a warning and reassigned to the Department of Dry Measurements, where the most passionate thing recorded is wheat. Of course, love isn't the only scandal. There's also sabotage. A certain bitter energy that lingers in shared quills and suspiciously delayed memos. You've had it happen, your best handwriting mysteriously copied, then used to endorse a scroll you never touched. Nothing damaging, but enough to get a raised eyebrow from your supervisor. You knew who did it. You said nothing, because here revenge is best served via strategic lunch seating and accidental ink spills. As you clean your desk for the day, you notice a small scribble on the underside of your blotter. A heart, drawn in red ink, faint, easily missed. You stare at it for a moment, then smile. Maybe it's just a leftover doodle, or maybe someone's still writing poetry in the margins. You wake up before dawn not because of ambition, but because your neighbor's rooster has apparently mistaken itself for a military trumpet. As you pull on your stiff tunic and squint into the dim light, you think briefly about switching careers. Goat herding, olive selling. Surely anything would be simpler than navigating another day of Byzantine paperwork. But then again, goat herders don't get scrolls with gold leaf on the edges. You arrive at the chancery to find chaos, not the dramatic kind with shouting and overturned inkwells, but the other kind. The silent kind. The eerie quiet before an administrative storm. Half the desks are empty. The other half are packed with scribes looking nervously toward the main corridor. Whispers, raised eyebrows, someone mentions barbarians. Not the scary axe-swinging type, at least not this time. No. The news is that a group of foreign envoys has arrived from the east, and the chancery is now expected to accommodate their document requests. This sounds harmless until you realize those document requests involve 3 languages, 4 protocols, and exactly 0 awareness of how things are supposed to work around here. You're summoned almost immediately. You and a handful of others are being tasked with preparing response letters to the envoy's inquiries about trade border treaties and, inexplicably, the imperial opinion on camels. You're not quite sure who gave you this assignment. Probably someone trying to dodge it themselves. The tricky part: the documents must be both official and impenetrably polite. You're told to use the soft yet firm tone, a phrase that basically means say nothing but say it like you mean something. You have a whole wax tablet filled with example sentences. Things like, "The Empire acknowledges the integrity of your position with measured gratitude. We observe your request with dignified contemplation and await further celestial clarity. Trade will continue in the spirit of reciprocal radiance provided celestial winds remain favorable." You begin writing, carefully, slowly. Because in this kind of diplomacy, every word is a potential weapon. And while the military fights with swords, you wield your quill like a fencer, precise, patient, and ideally not stabbed by lunchtime. Historians still debate whether Byzantine diplomacy was genius stalling or a master class in controlled vagueness. Some say the empire's ability to delay decisions actually saved it long enough to outlive enemies who couldn't quite figure out what the question has been elevated for imperial consideration even meant. It wasn't just the letters, it was how they were delivered. Byzantine clerks, when tasked with responding to foreign powers, adopted a ritualized form of scroll preparation. This included specific folds, embossed seals, scenting the scrolls with rosewater to demonstrate refinement, and occasionally tying them with hand-loomed ribbons, each color representing a layer of diplomatic nuance. You're halfway through tying a green and gold ribbon when someone knocks over the inkwell. It splashes across the desk. A blot seeps into a scroll meant for the Khazar envoy. You pause. The ink blot looks suspiciously like a chicken. Could be interpreted as an insult. You scrap the scroll and start again. You've heard stories about scroll mishaps leading to decades of confusion. One famous tale tells of a peace offer mistakenly delivered with the imperial seal upside down. The recipient interpreted this as mockery and retaliated by sending the empire a box of spoiled fish. Formal ties were cut for 20 years. And then there's the time an official used the wrong honorific in addressing a Bulgarian prince, calling him guardian of humble valleys instead of ruler of celestial peaks. Both poetic. One, a compliment. The other, not so much. You don't want to make that mistake. At midday, the foreign delegation enters the chancery. Robes, turbans, elaborate jewelry. You're not allowed to speak to them, but you watch through the curtain as they review the documents with furrowed brows. One of them smiles, another frowns. A third seems to be calculating whether the parchment is worth reselling. You've done your job, you think. Still, no one relaxes until the envoys leave. The entire office is a tightrope trying to balance formality, bureaucracy, and just enough ambiguity to avoid direct offense. Some say it's like dancing with an ox. Others say it's more like politely offering tea to a bear and hoping it doesn't eat you. Later in the lunch nook, the mood is both relieved and exhausted. A few scrolls remain unsigned, awaiting clarification from the emperor, or possibly from his astrologer, or maybe the empress's pet falcon. No one's sure anymore who actually approves these things. You spoon your lentil mush and nod along as someone rehashes how close we all came to another parchment debacle, like the Georgian scroll incident of 941. That one, according to legend, was solved when a monk rewrote the entire treaty as a hymn and performed it during Vespers. Peace was declared shortly after. Coincidence? Perhaps. And yet, as stressful as it is, part of you admires the system. The slow, deliberate way the Byzantines turned even the simplest exchange into an elaborate ritual. The way they outlasted invaders not with swords, but with scrolls so confusing their enemies gave up trying to understand them. You finish your meal, return to your desk, and begin organizing the duplicate copies. You triple-check the seals. You cross-reference the color codes. You double-tie the ribbons. Because when a single word can declare war, even a humble clerk's care becomes a defense line. By evening, the wind has died down. The chancery is quiet again. The foreign envoys are gone, their camels braying softly in the distance. You sit at your desk and light one final candle. The last scroll of the day contains nothing urgent, just a routine update on river tolls. But you copy it with the same care because in this empire, even the river tolls have been known to start a battle. The next morning begins with an unexpected announcement. All ink supplies are to be inventoried immediately. The decree is delivered with ceremonial importance by a clerk wearing 2 different sandals and an expression that suggests he has slept beneath his desk. The room freezes. You glance at your inkpot instinctively, like a child hiding candy. It's half full, blessedly so, but you know that doesn't matter. Today's not about what ink you have. It's about what ink is missing. And sure enough, it's gone. The entire east wing dry. Every inkwell empty. Every backup pot vanished. The emergency reserves, just vinegar and lies. The whispers begin at once. It's the Inkwell heist, someone mutters dramatically as if quoting a legend. A few heads nod. A few more look around shiftily. Theories blossom faster than scrolls in springtime. Someone suggests a thief. Someone else proposes sabotage from rival departments, maybe even the monks. Spiridon leans over and murmurs, "You didn't hear this from me, but I think the Treasury did it." To delay the tax reports, you suppress a sigh. This is not the first time ink has gone missing, and it will not be the last. But this is the worst it's ever been. Dozens of bureaucrats with no ink, no scrolls to write, no instructions but to inventory. Which means in practice, everyone stands around accusing one another politely and staring into pots like they're oracles. You walk through the aisles of inkless desks. The faces are grim. You see one clerk cradling his favorite pen, whispering sweet nothings to it. Another is fashioning a desperate substitute ink from boiled onion skins. It smells powerful. You pass a desk with a note pinned to the surface. They took the black. Only red remains. It's written in charcoal, underlined twice. For emphasis, presumably. Historians still argue whether this kind of shortage was common or whether it signaled something deeper infighting political unrest or a very well-coordinated prank by the office interns. No one agrees. No one ever will. That's Byzantium for you. To understand the gravity of this, you must understand that ink isn't just ink here. It's authority. It's permanence. It's the sound of your decisions echoing through time. Without ink, you're nothing. Just a silent man in itchy robes with thoughts no one will read. So when someone finds an abandoned trail of ink droplets near the storage room, it's like discovering a holy relic. The scribes descend upon the scene with all the delicacy of starving wolves. You remain at a safe distance, watching with the detached calm of a man who still has his half-pot. For now, the droplets end at a cabinet behind the furnace. The door creaks open. Inside, not the stolen ink. Just 3 ancient quills and a very moldy scroll labeled Backup Budget Year of the Flaming Comet. The trail was a dead end. You return to your desk. You look at your inkwell. You write one word, calm. You underline it. Then you stop conserving ink. Always conserving. By mid-morning, things have turned theatrical. One senior scribe has accused a rival of hoarding. Another has declared a personal vow of silence until his inkwell is returned, which would be noble if he weren't so dramatically mouthing betrayal at everyone who passes. The supervisor attempts order. He calls an assembly. The room gathers murmuring and clinking sandal buckles. He speaks slowly. Until the ink is found or replaced, we will return to oral transcriptions. Gasps. Oral transcriptions are the ancient fallback when one clerk speaks and another copies by memory, later using communal ink. It's inefficient, imprecise, and hated by everyone. You draw the short stick. Your assigned partner, Xenon, speaks like a poet with a head cold. He begins dictating. In the matter of the river tariffs, behold the vessels. Know the boats, know the aquatic merchants. You pinch your temples. This is your day now. By afternoon, tempers flare again. One of the younger scribes, in a fit of desperation, attempts to extract ink from a dried fig. He creates a substance that vaguely resembles ink and definitely smells like despair. He tries to write with it. The letters smear. He cries. Spiridon declares it a tragedy. Someone begins composing a eulogy for functional scrolls. And then, a miracle. Someone finds a stash, not in the storage room, but behind a ceremonial curtain in the archive. A basket of ink pots perfectly preserved, sealed with wax. Each labeled in a precise tiny hand. Do not use unless absolutely necessary. The room erupts in disbelief, relief, accusation. Who hid them? Who decided what absolutely necessary meant? A quick debate breaks out. You stay silent. You watch. The ink is shared eventually. Not fairly, but shared. You receive a quarter pot, more than some, less than others, enough. And as you sit again at your desk, dipping your quill with reverence, you realize that the theft may never be solved. The culprits may never be punished, but the scrolls will continue. The empire endures not through force, but through form, through people like you recording it all. You write a single phrase at the top of your new scroll, order restored temporarily. It feels right. The air in the chancery today smells like stewed leeks and quiet tension. It's lunch hour, and if you weren't in the know, you'd think everyone was just eating slowly. But those long pauses between bites, the side glances, the dramatic sighs before someone picks up their spoon, classic signs of a seating war. You clutch your bowl of lukewarm leek soup, a staple of the office kitchen, whether you like it or not, and begin the daily ritual of finding a place to sit that neither offends nor implies political alliance. It's more complicated than battlefield strategy. The Byzantine lunchroom isn't a cafeteria. It's a test of social intuition, where you sit next to whom and how far from the olive bowl all carry meaning. Sit too close to the archivist from Department B. You're showing support. Sit too far from your supervisor. Disrespect. Sit beside the robe inspector's cousin twice in a week. Gossip bait. You find a seat between a parchment trimmer named Irene and a quiet man who speaks exclusively in proverbs. Better a cold soup than a hot feud. He says, nudging the bread your way. You nod politely. You've learned not to engage too deeply. Across the room, today's big topic bubbles like overcooked lentils, the forbidden olives. A shipment of salted green olives imperial grade imported from Sicily was mistakenly delivered to the chancery kitchen yesterday. Mistakenly. As in meant for someone else. Someone with purple curtains and armed guards. But the kitchen boy didn't know that, did he? So he served them, briefly, silently. And for a glorious 5 minutes, mid-level officials across the chancery experienced what can only be described as divine snacking, and then they were taken away. Now a clerk in customs is under review. The kitchen boy has vanished, and the phrase, "Did you get an olive?" has become both code and legend. You did not get an olive, but Spiridon did, and he won't stop reminding you. Historians still debate whether food incidents like this were accidental or cleverly orchestrated status plays. In a place where robes can signal superiority, perhaps a humble bowl of imported olives carried the same weight. A temporary taste of power. Salty, delicious power. Back in the lunchroom, the politics continue. The seating near the stove, the warmest corner, is controlled by the scribes of imperial finance. You tried to sit there once. You were handed a scroll of obscure tax codes and told to recite them as payment. You returned to your usual seat near the cracked window and the draft that smells faintly of pickled onions. Today the seating pattern shifts. Someone dares sit across from a bishop's assistant without an invitation. Gasps. Subtle coughs. A spoon is dropped dramatically. It's the kind of silent theater that would make Euripides proud. Meanwhile, the food itself doesn't improve. The leek soup is gritty. The bread is last week's. But there are small comforts. Someone managed to smuggle in a honey date. It's passed around the table like contraband. You get a bite. It's glorious. You remember a time last year when the kitchen tried a new recipe, a porridge with vinegar and fish bits. Half the staff went home early. The official reason, candle smoke inhalation. The truth, porridge regret. And yet, for all its flaws, the lunch hour is a sacred pause. A chance to observe without being observed. To collect scraps of intel. To listen. From the corner of your ear, you hear whispers of a memo misrouted to the wrong bishop. From another table, someone mutters that the robe laundering guidelines have changed. Again. You file this all away. Information is more valuable than olives. As the hour winds down, a scribe from archives rises too quickly and spills his soup onto his cloak. It's soaked, leaky, and green. Someone offers him a napkin. Another offers a robe brush. Everyone is watching. He declines both. He walks out with dignity until he slips slightly on the tiled floor. There is no laughter, only respectful silence. Back at your desk, you resume your scroll work. The ink is sluggish. Your fingers are still sticky with breadcrumbs. But you feel oddly fortified. You survived lunch politics. You didn't offend anyone. You nodded at the right people. You didn't mention the olives. And most importantly, you didn't sit near Spiridon and his olive story for the third time. You return to your scroll, which happens to be a trade report on dried fish. You smile. You add a margin note. Pair with olives if available. No one will see it, but it's your rebellion. Quiet, salty, persistent. You arrive at your desk expecting the usual, a stack of petitions, a leaky inkwell, and Spiridon already mid-gossip, but instead you're handed a transfer scroll. To the monastic correspondence subdivision it reads, temporarily, allegedly. That's how it always starts. You've heard the stories. Quiet chambers, candlelit scribes, long scrolls full of saints' names and fasting calendars. Some say the monks are peaceful. Others claim they're passive-aggressive geniuses who invented 5 new ways to insult someone while blessing them. Either way you're going, the hall to the monastic wing is quieter than the chancery. It smells of wax dust and lavender soap. The floors creak in an ancient, honest way. A bearded monk with ink-stained fingers greets you with a nod and passes you a scroll. You're on scriptorium duty, transcription and redrafting. No embellishments. You nod solemnly and immediately begin scanning for hidden jokes, because this is the secret of monastic correspondence. On the surface, it's devotional, calm, pure. But beneath the psalms and supply lists, sass, subtle jabs, shady grammar, entire sermons laced with inside jokes. You find a scroll halfway through the phrase, "We humbly request a delay in goat delivery due to divine reflection." Another mentions unseasonably hostile bees as the reason for postponing an abbey inspection. But that's not the real twist. No, the real surprise is that monks do the empire's dirty work. Lazy nobles, illiterate bishops, minor officials who haven't mastered their own titles. They all send their letters through the monastic scribes. Ghostwriting the Byzantine way. You read royal announcements that were clearly dictated between mouthfuls of almond cake. You see imperial notes that include corrections penned in monastic margins with comments like, "Does His Highness really want to threaten war over cheese?" The monks don't just copy, they edit, they improve. Sometimes they get creative. One famous story involves a monk named Georgios, who, tired of transcribing identical requests for roofing repairs, began inserting miniature stories between the lines. Tales of heroic chickens, philosophical frogs, scrolls that, when fully unrolled, contained both a grant for hay storage and an epic about a talking cabbage. He was eventually promoted. You settle into your assigned desk, small, sturdy, and blessed with 2 functioning lamps. You unwrap your first scroll. It's a donation ledger, straightforward enough. You begin copying. The rhythm is oddly soothing. Your quill glides over the parchment like a boat on a lazy river. A few desks down, 2 monks whisper. You catch the words Bishop Theodorus and ink recipe. Intriguing. You lean slightly. Apparently the bishop's signature shade of blue is not divine inspiration, but a special blend involving boiled mulberries and vinegar. This explains why half the letters smell like a salad. During lunch, which here involves dried figs, unsweetened porridge, and a surprisingly generous jug of herbal water, you're invited to sit with the scribes. They are courteous, curious, and hilariously dry. "We once received a letter requesting a blessing for a pig," says Brother Nilos. "The pig's name was Maximilian. We sent him a saint's pendant. What happened to the pig, you ask? He became a local bishop. He doesn't smile, but his eyes twinkle." Historians still argue whether the monastic scribes deliberately inserted satire into official documents or simply developed a very refined sense of holy sarcasm. After one afternoon here, you're convinced of the latter. Back in the scriptorium, you're tasked with redrafting a noblewoman's request for a new well. She's written her plea in clumsy Greek with too many exclamation points. Your supervising monk reads it aloud in monotone. "It is so dry. Please, I beg you. Water." Then he clears his throat and hands it to you. You rewrite it as, "The estate suffers from a persistent lack of natural hydration. We request imperial consideration for the installation of a new subterranean reservoir system." There. Dignified. Subtle. Water by bureaucracy. You learn quickly that here the scrolls matter, but the style matters more. Passive voice is gold. Euphemisms are currency. You don't complain, you seek clarity. You don't accuse, you highlight inconsistencies. And you never ever end a letter without invoking divine patience. One of the monks shows you a scroll addressed to a tax inspector. We recognize your dedication to the imperial treasury and gently question the need for a third evaluation in this calendar year. Translation: stop harassing us. We're broke. The day passes like honey dripping from a spoon. Slow, quiet, sweet in an unexpected way. And then near closing you find it. A scroll labeled Pending Revision. You unroll it and see there in the margins a tiny doodle. A monk riding a goose. The goose wears a crown. Beneath it, in minuscule letters, For Future Empires. You laugh quietly. Then you carefully roll the scroll, set it aside, and light your lamp for one last task. It's peaceful here. No Spiridon, no olive drama. Just quiet work and gentle mockery in verse form. You may not stay long, but for now you ghostwrite wisdom one slow scroll at a time. You're back in the main chancery now. The monastery was a calming detour. But tranquility can only last so long before you're pulled back into the whirlpool of bureaucratic absurdity like a loose scroll drawn toward the flame of empire. Today's assignment comes with a frown and a scroll too heavy for its contents. You unroll it carefully. It's not a report, not a decree. It's something far worse, a meeting agenda. You groan audibly. A mistake. 3 heads snap toward you. Meetings are sacred in Byzantium, long, meandering, formal, and usually pointless. Still, you've been summoned, so you show up. The room is already half full. The long table is scratched with names carved into it, either a desperate act of boredom or the remnants of some forgotten seating protocol. Scrolls are stacked in miniature towers. One man is nervously fluffing his robes. Someone has brought their own ink pillow. That's how serious this is. At the head of the table sits Nikitas, the meeting coordinator, a title he invented, lobbied for, and now clutches like a bishop clutches incense. He raises a hand. Let us begin the pre-meeting to prepare for the meeting. You nod along with everyone else as if this makes sense. It doesn't, but it's tradition. The pre-meeting consists of 3 parts. 1. Reviewing the last meeting's minutes. 2. Agreeing on the format of this meeting's minutes. And 3. Selecting a volunteer to sing the opening clause. Yes, sing. It's not just decorative. According to a long-forgotten decree, and one enthusiastic scribe with a background in liturgical chant meetings must begin with a sung summary of the first agenda item. Today's topic: reevaluation of cross-departmental parchment allocation strategies. A crowd pleaser. Spiridon gets volunteered. He clears his throat and sings off-key something about equitable scroll distribution. It's both painful and mesmerizing. You clap politely. So does everyone else. Mandatory applause. The meeting proper begins. First order of business, the ongoing duplication of scroll titles. Apparently, 3 departments have been labeling their reports identically, leading to a mix-up in which the emperor nearly approved a shipment of leeches instead of lanterns. No injuries, thankfully. Nikitas suggests implementing a universal header format. The table groans. Someone mutters, "Again." Another insists on preserving departmental linguistic freedom. A vote is proposed. It's unclear what the vote is for, but small stones are handed out for yes and olive pits for no. Second topic: ink ration scheduling. This is important because of last week's heist, which still remains unsolved. You listen as 3 subcommittees argue about the optimal time to refill inkwells. Morning refills efficient, but then people hoard. Afternoon refills. Risk of spillage increases. Someone proposes a mid-morning ink surge which sounds more dramatic than it is. The debate lasts 47 minutes. You try to contribute once, suggesting a shared Inkwell cart, but are immediately referred to Subcommittee 4B, whose current project is storage solutions for spare quills. You're not allowed to speak again without an official scroll. And then comes the main event. Agenda Item 3. Reports on the effectiveness of previous meetings. A scroll is unrolled. It is 12 feet long. It details each meeting held in the past 90 days, the stated outcomes, and what, if anything, actually happened. Spoiler, very little. Some highlights include a decision to implement robe color coding immediately abandoned due to dye shortages, a policy on loud quill scraping still under review, a proposed scribe appreciation day indefinitely postponed because no one could agree on the shape of the celebratory pastry. Historians still argue whether these Byzantine meetings were the source of their bureaucratic resilience or the reason so many things were delayed indefinitely. Some suggest the empire's longevity was precisely due to the inability to finalize any disastrous decisions. You begin doodling in the margin of your agenda scroll, a small dragon holding a scroll in its claws. You consider giving it a name. Nikitas drones on about workflow harmonization. A side debate breaks out about whether signatures should include both first name and title, or just initials. This spirals into a tangent about signature legibility. Someone unrolls a sample scroll from the Department of Salt. The signature is just a squiggle and a fish. Everyone nods. That sounds right. Eventually, someone raises the question. No one wants to hear. Should we schedule a meeting to follow up on this meeting? The room falls silent. You can feel the weight of that sentence pressing on everyone's soul. Someone coughs. Someone else cries softly into their scroll bag. Nikita smiles. Yes, let us. And just like that, the parchment flies. Dates are proposed. Rooms are booked. A 3-hour slot is selected for next week's meeting outcome reflection roundtable. Spiridon quietly sighs the sigh of a man who's sung his last scroll summary for the week. As you leave the room, your legs aching, your ink dry, your spirit slightly bruised, you think, at least no one mentioned the olives. Back at your desk, you log the meeting in the minutes of minutes ledger. You write, meeting concluded. Outcomes pending. Morale ambiguous. Today, there's an odd energy in the chancery. The lamps are burning a little brighter. The parchment smells faintly of roses, and the scrolls have been stacked in suspiciously perfect columns. Something is up. And then you hear the whisper, someone got fired. You blink. Fired from this office, that's practically folklore. In Byzantine bureaucracy, no one ever really leaves. Clerks retire into other clerical positions. Scribes are reassigned to more peaceful tasks, like counting tax goats or documenting rainfall in obscure coastal provinces. But fired, truly removed from office. That's like watching a unicorn hand in its resignation scroll. The story circulates quickly. A minor official in the Department of Land Assessments allegedly filed 3 blank scrolls as finalized reports. Not just once, 3 times, over 3 months. One scroll simply read, "It was mostly fine." But that's not why he was dismissed. No, the scandal came later when he claimed that detailed assessments were overrated and referred to his own scrolls as vibes-based administration. You admire the boldness. The empire famously does not run on vibes. The process of dismissal is as slow as the empire itself. First come the reviews, committees are formed. Reports are re-reported. The offending scrolls are examined under candlelight for signs of satire forgery or sleep-deprived commentary. Witnesses are gathered. Statements are read aloud. Nothing happens for a week. then two. Then, suddenly, it does. And when it happens, it's not with fanfare. It's subtle. You notice the shift when his desk is quietly repurposed. His robe stand is removed. His nameplate, made from cheap wood but still dignified, is gently tucked into a cabinet. His inkwell is reassigned to a junior scribe who immediately breaks it. Tragic, really. There's no announcement, no farewell scroll, just absence. The Byzantines are masters of silent removal. It's almost comforting. But this raises a bigger question. If someone can be fired, why aren't more people let go? The answer is simple. Byzantine civil jobs are sticky. Sticky like half-dried ink. Once you're in, you're in. You could misfile an entire province and still get promoted. You once knew a man who approved 14 blank petitions because he thought they were test pages. He now oversees agricultural inventories for the eastern borders. Job security here borders on mystical. Historians still argue whether this was the result of nepotism, institutional memory, or just deep-seated fear of change. Some suggest that firing someone required so many layers of scrolls, approvals, signatures, and ceremonial gestures that it was often easier to let the offender quietly fade into the background or promote them sideways. Take the case of Philaretos, a famously sleepy scribe, who once accidentally copied the same sentence 73 times in a royal decree. Instead of being reprimanded, he was made director of monotextual consistency. He now ensures that decree formatting stays repetitive for the sake of tradition. But there are ways to get rid of someone if you're subtle. The classic technique: promote them to a meaningless office in the farthest possible region, one that requires travel by mule and a boat with holes. Say the inspector of provincial ladder safety. It's elegant, it's effective, and it's considered merciful. You suspect this is what really happened to the dismissed official. Officially, he's been transferred to oversee aquatic levees in Lower Moesia. Unofficially, he has been vanished. Everyone knows it, but no one says it. Instead, we pretend to admire the speed of his career advancement. Spiridon even toasts to him with barley water at lunch. To the brave, the vague, the vaguely brave. You think about your own job security. You've made mistakes. Everyone has. But you've never submitted a blank scroll. You've never referred to taxation as a vibe. You've never tied a scroll shut with leftover shoelace, although you did once use twine from the kitchen. Close call. The key to survival, you've decided, is not perfection. It's presence. You show up, you nod at the right people, you file your scrolls. You don't try to reform the system. You become the system one ink blot at a time. There's a knock at your desk. A courier hands you a scroll. From the Archive Review Committee, he says, then vanishes. You unroll it. A simple notice. Your desk has been deemed too close to the supply cupboard. You are hereby promoted to assistant custodian of corridor flow. You stare at it. You've been promoted. You don't even know what that means. You report to your new desk, which is 1 foot to the left of your old one. There's no robe change, no new hat, just a fresh nameplate and a vague increase in scroll intake. Spiridon leans over. Congratulations. You're now technically above me in corridor access hierarchy. He winks. Don't let the power go to your head. You laugh. Quietly. Because in Byzantium, even getting fired is complicated, but getting promoted, that's where the real danger begins. You return to your newly reassigned desk, a proud half-meter farther from the supply cupboard, with a sense of cautious triumph. Assistant Custodian of Corridor Flow, A title so specific, so delightfully ambiguous that it might actually protect you from further notice. It sounds important, but means absolutely nothing. Ideal. The corridor, for its part, seems to respect your new rank. People nod slightly as they pass you. One clerk even pauses before walking as if awaiting permission to proceed. You wave him along benevolently, already abusing the power. It feels good. Your first task in this new role, according to the scroll pinned under your inkwell, is to monitor navigational efficiency between Room A records and Room D scribe's lounge. You interpret this as sit here and pretend to observe foot traffic. Perfect. So you sit quill in hand, ready to fake a few charts. And then you notice a scroll peeking from the back of the shelf. It's dusty, wrapped in faded ribbon and labeled only memoranda retained. You unroll it slowly. It's odd. A series of notes dated sporadically over the last 50 years. Each written in a different hand, each describing something slightly off. June year of the Red Locusts. The Emperor's Hound has been entered into payroll under security. No one will correct the listing. August year of the Quiet Flood. A duplicate census was submitted for a city that does not exist. Still under consideration. December year of the Dust Moon discovered 47 scrolls in storage marked for review. One simply says, "Are sheep taxable?" in 5 languages. You keep reading. More and more entries, forgotten questions, unresolved jokes, and unresolved memos that loop in on themselves. It's like an archaeological dig through the mind of the empire. One entry catches your eye. March year of fogged mirrors. Scroll recovered from corridor shelf. No author. Topic: ink storage regulation for lunar events. Filed under mystical concerns. You realize what this is. It's the Empire's lost and unresolvable file. A kind of collective shrug preserved in parchment, the bureaucratic equivalent of a sigh. Historians still argue whether collections like this were meant as records or as satire. Perhaps both. A way for clerks to acknowledge the absurdity they lived in without ever saying so directly. Inspired, you begin your own note. You keep it dry, of course. Factual, toneless. May year of the soft pigeon. Discovered memoranda file. Content uncertain. Emotional impact. Gentle bewilderment. Recommend indefinite retention. You fold the scroll and place it back exactly where you found it. Untouched, but now a little longer. Outside your window, a pigeon lands. Not particularly symbolic, but comforting. Your quill scratches on. A report on ink usage ratios. A petition to add one more bench to the break room. A memo about robe hook shortages. And then just before the hour bell, one final scroll arrives from the Department of Agriculture. It reads, "We have received a shipment of geese. No one ordered geese. Please advise." You stare at it for a moment. Then very quietly you add it to the memoranda scroll, because sometimes the best you can do is record, preserve, gently let the empire float on in its own strangely elegant nonsense. You lean back in your chair. Another day done. Your fingers ache, your back is stiff, but your scroll pile is smaller and your title is slightly more official than it was yesterday. You light your last candle, the room humming with the soft rhythm of distant scribes and rustling parchment. Outside, the city breathes domes glowing gold in the dusk, doves cooing in eaves, a cat darting past the colonnade like a shadow with whiskers. You look down at your desk, ink-stained, wax-speckled, and humming with the quiet dignity of forgotten empires. And you smile. Because somewhere out there, a goose is causing a problem, and someone somewhere will write about it. And that's how Byzantium survives.